The Galactic Union had kept peace for 3,000 years. Every species knew the rules. When there was a problem, you talked. When someone attacked you, you negotiated. When someone took something from you, you made a deal to get it back. This was how civilized beings behaved. This was how the galaxy worked. They were tall and graceful, with skin like colored glass and 4 eyes that saw everything. They had written most of the Union's laws. They were short and calculating, their minds like computers, always measuring profit and loss. There were insects the size of bears, clicking and buzzing as they built their hive worlds. Dozens of other species filled the Union, each different, each following the same basic rule: talk first, fight never. Then the humans arrived. They came from a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. They were young, inexperienced, and not very impressive. Their ships were small. Their technology was average. They smiled too much and asked too many questions. The older species looked at them the way adults look at eager children. No one thought much about the humans. They were just another new species learning how the galaxy worked. Then came the day that changed everything. The passenger ship Celestial Dawn was traveling through neutral space. It carried 2,400 passengers from 12 different species. Among them were 847 humans returning home from a trade conference. They were businessmen, scientists, families with children, and elderly tourists seeing the stars for the first time. They found them on the third day of their journey. They were slavers. They had been slavers for 1,000 years. Their ships were black and ugly, built to frighten. Their bodies were covered in hard shells, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. They took what they wanted and sold what they didn't need. The Union tolerated them because fighting them was expensive and negotiating with them was cheap. Warlord commanded the fleet that surrounded the Celestial Dawn. He was old and cruel, with scars covering his face and a reputation for getting what he wanted. He sent his soldiers onto the passenger ship. They rounded up everyone and put them in holding cells, then opened communications with the Galactic Union. Ambassador of the answered the call. He was experienced in these matters. He had negotiated with kidnappers and pirates many times before. He kept his voice calm and reasonable. Warlord said, "We are prepared to discuss terms for the release of the passengers." Laughed, his teeth clicked together as he spoke. 1 billion galactic credits, the mining rights to the Helios asteroid belt, and official recognition of our territory claims in the outer systems. You have 30 days. Nodded slowly. These were high demands, but not impossible. The Union could find the credits. The mining rights would hurt, but they could recover. Recognition was distasteful, but they had given worse to end worse situations. "We will consult with the Council," said. "Please do not harm the passengers while we prepare our response." "Bring me what I want and everyone lives," said. "Waste my time and I start sending bodies." The transmission ended. The Union Council met within the hour. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Hall, their voices mixing in dozens of languages. The translation machines hummed as everyone spoke at once. Most agreed on the basic approach. Find the money, make the deal, get the hostages back. It was expensive, but it was how things were done. Then the human ambassador asked to speak. Commander Sarah was young. She had served in Earth's military before becoming a diplomat. Her uniform was simple and dark, with no decorations except a small flag on her shoulder. She stood straight and still as she waited for the chamber to quiet. "The United Earth government has a message for Warlord," she said. Ambassador felt relief wash through him. The humans would contribute to the ransom. Perhaps they would offer technology or resources. Every contribution helped. "What terms does Earth wish to propose?" asked. His face showed no expression. Her voice was flat and cold. "There will be no terms. There will be no ransom. There will be no negotiation." She paused. "Earth does not bargain with those who murder innocents." The chamber went completely silent. His 4 eyes blinked in confusion. He wondered if the translation machine had made an error. "Commander, perhaps I misunderstand. You are refusing to help your own people." "We are helping them," said, "by not paying." "But the will kill them." "Maybe." His voice did not change. "And if we pay, what happens next month when another ship is taken? What happens next year when they learn that human lives are worth money? How many more will die because we taught the galaxy that kidnapping humans is profitable?" The ambassador raised one thin hand. "Commander, this is not logical. The immediate threat is clear. The future is uncertain. Surely saving lives now is more important than theoretical future lives." Turn to look at him. On Earth, we learned that lesson the hard way. For many years, some of our nations paid ransoms. Every time they paid, more people were taken. The kidnappers grew rich. They bought better weapons. They took more hostages. Thousands died because the ransoms funded more kidnapping. She walked to the center of the chamber. Then some nations stopped paying. They refused all negotiations. In the short term, people died who might have been saved. Parents buried children. Countries mourned. But in the long term, the kidnapping stopped because there was no profit in them anymore. "This is different," insisted. "They are a stellar nation, not common criminals. That makes it more important, not less." Eyes swept across the assembled representatives. "If we pay a stellar nation, every stellar nation learns the lesson. Every warlord, every pirate, every opportunistic government learns that humans can be bought with human blood." She turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, she stopped and looked back. "Earth's second fleet is 18 days away. We have sent them a message. They are coming." "Coming to do what?" called after her. His answer was quiet but clear: "To get our people back." She left the chamber. An hour later, the Galactic Union detected a transmission leaving human space. It was encrypted and narrow-beam, aimed at empty space where nothing visible waited. But something was waiting. The human Second Fleet changed course and began burning hard toward territory. Warlord received only one message from Earth in response to his demands. It contained no credits, no concessions, no promises. Just 5 words that the translators struggled to process because no species had ever sent such a message before. The message said, "We're coming for our people." Read it 3 times. Then he laughed and showed it to his officers. They all laughed together. The humans were sending threats instead of money. The humans thought they could frighten them with words. They did not understand what was coming. No one in the galaxy did. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The humans had refused to pay. The humans had threatened the humans were sending warships instead of money. Every species talked about it. Every news channel broadcast it. No one could believe what they were hearing. In 3,000 years, no species had ever refused negotiation. The concept was so strange that some translation machines could not process it. They kept returning errors, as if the words themselves were broken. Ambassador did not give up. He went to the human embassy on the 4th day, hoping to change Commander's mind. The embassy was a small building, simple and plain, with a blue and green flag hanging outside. Human soldiers stood at the gates, watching him approach with calm eyes. Met him in a small room with white walls and simple furniture. She offered him water and waited for him to speak. "You will kill your own people," said. His skin flickered with stress colors. "They are not patient. When they believe negotiations have failed, they will execute hostages. This is documented. This is known." Nodded slowly. "We know what they might do." "Then why, help me understand? I have negotiated with kidnappers for 200 years. I have saved thousands of lives by finding acceptable terms. This is wisdom. This is experience. Why do you reject it?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. A holographic screen appeared in the air between them. It showed images from Earth's history: burning buildings, crying families, men with covered faces holding weapons to the heads of kneeling prisoners. Do you know what a terrorist is, Ambassador? Studied the images. Someone who uses violence for political purposes. Close enough. Touched the screen and the images changed. For many decades, Earth was plagued by groups who took hostages for money or political demands. Airplane hijackers, kidnappers, bombers. Every nation struggled with the same question: what do we do when they take our people? She showed him a map of Earth with different regions marked in different colors. Some nations paid. Every time a citizen was taken, they negotiated, they traded prisoners, they sent money, they made deals. The map showed lines connecting kidnapping locations to payment sources. The result was predictable. Kidnappings increased. The payments funded better weapons, better organization, more kidnappings. It became an industry. Watched the lines multiply across the map, but they saved the immediate victims. Sometimes, and created more victims tomorrow, switched to another set of images. Other nations adopted a different policy. They called it the no concessions doctrine: zero negotiation with terrorists, no ransom payments, no prisoner exchanges for hostages, ever. What happened? In the short term, people died. His voice was heavy with old grief. Families lost children who might have been saved. The nations that refused to pay buried their citizens while watching other nations buy their people back. It was hard. It was cruel. Many people said it was wrong. She touched the screen again. A graph appeared, showing kidnapping rates over time. The lines for non-paying nations dropped steadily. The lines for paying nations stayed high or increased. In the long term, the kidnapping stopped. Not all at once, not easily, but year by year, the criminals and terrorists learned that taking citizens from certain nations gained them nothing. No money, no trades, just attention from very angry people with very long memories. Looked at. Those nations' citizens became the safest in the world, because everyone knew that kidnapping them was pointless. His membranes flickered as he processed this. The logic was cold but clear. Pay now, pay forever. Refuse now, suffer once. But Ambassador, they are not terrorists. They are a stellar nation with fleets and armies and territory. Which makes the principle even more important. Leaned forward. On Earth, we eventually broke the kidnapping industry, but we were one planet. Here, we are one species among thousands. If we pay every species in this galaxy learns that humans can be bought. Our ships will never be safe. Our colonies will live in fear. Our children will grow up knowing they might be taken and sold. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, alien ships moved through the sky of the station, carrying representatives from dozens of worlds. We did not come to the stars to become prey, Ambassador. We came to live, to build, to explore. We cannot do that if every pirate and warlord sees us as walking money. Rose and joined her at the window. And what of the hostages? Do they not matter? They matter more than I can express. His voice cracked slightly before she controlled it. There are children on that ship, families, people who did nothing wrong except travel through space. Every one of them matters. Every one of them deserves to come home. Then pay. And teach the galaxy to take more of them, shook her head. No, we will get them back, but not by paying, never by paying. How? By showing and everyone watching, that taking humans is the worst decision they ever made. Meanwhile, on the celestial dawn, the hostages waited. The guards were not gentle. They kept the prisoners in large holding areas, separated by species. Food was basic. Water was limited. Medical care was almost non-existent. Several passengers had been beaten for minor offenses. One elderly had died from lack of medication. But the human section was different. At first, the humans had been afraid like everyone else. They cried, they begged, they held their children and prayed for rescue. But as the days passed, something changed. The tears dried. The begging stopped. A strange quiet settled over them. The guards noticed it. The humans watched them now, not with fear but with attention. They memorized patrol schedules. They tested the strength of barriers. They talked in low voices, planning things the guards could not hear. An old woman named had served in Earth's military 50 years ago. She gathered the other former soldiers. There were 11 of them, and began quiet conversations. A middle-aged man named David had been an engineer. He started examining the ship's systems, looking for weaknesses. A young mother named Lisa organized the children into groups, keeping them calm and ready to move. They were not just waiting, they were preparing. A prisoner named watched the humans with confusion. She had accepted her fate. The ransom would be paid. She would go home. This was how things worked. Why were the humans acting so strangely? She asked a human woman named Jenny, who was teaching some children a quiet game. Why do you plan? Your government will pay like the others. You will be released. Jenny smiled, but her eyes were hard. Our government won't pay. Then you will die. Maybe, Jenny shrugged, or maybe our people will come for us. No one comes. No one fights. This is not how the galaxy works. Jenny's smile grew wider. It's how humans work. We don't leave our people behind, ever, even if it's hard, even if it costs us everything. She looked toward the small window that showed the stars outside. They're coming, I don't know when. I don't know how many, but they're coming. And when they get here, I plan to be ready to help. Did not understand. She had lived 200 years and never seen anyone fight to rescue hostages. The idea was as alien to her as flying without wings. But she watched the humans prepare. She watched them exercise in small spaces. She watched them teach each other fighting techniques using only their hands. She watched them smile at each other with a confidence that made no sense. And slowly, she began to wonder if maybe there were things about the galaxy that she did not know. 18 days after the capture, a message came through the ship systems. It was broadcast on all channels, so everyone could hear it. The human Second Fleet had entered the system. They were coming. Warlord stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the sensors. The human fleet had arrived. 32 ships, small and ordinary, moving in a standard formation. He counted them 3 times to make sure the machines were working correctly. He laughed so hard that his officers looked at him with concern. This is what they send. Teeth clicked together in amusement. 32 ships against my 200. This is their great rescue. His tactical officer studied the readings. The ships appear to be cruiser-class Warlord, standard weapons, standard shields, nothing unusual. They are insects flying into a flame. Opened communications to his fleet. All ships, prepare to engage. We will destroy these humans and send the wreckage back to Earth as a message. Then their government will learn to negotiate properly. On the celestial dawn, the hostages heard the announcement. The guards laughed and made jokes about weak humans. They gathered the prisoners near viewing windows so they could watch their rescuers die. The old woman who had served in Earth's military stood at the front of the human group. Her white hair was dirty from weeks of captivity, but her eyes were sharp. She watched the distant lights of the approaching fleet. "Get ready," she whispered to those around her. "Whatever happens, be ready to move." In space, the human Second Fleet continued its approach. Admiral stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, watching the mass of ships ahead. His officers were quiet, focused on their tasks. No one seemed worried. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported. 200 enemy vessels confirmed. Weapons are charging. They're preparing to engage. Nodded calmly. "Signal all carriers, begin deployment." What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. The 32 human ships suddenly became 312 contacts. The larger vessels had been carriers, but not ordinary carriers. Human engineers had developed something called compressed launch bays. Using small warp fields inside their own hulls, They had folded space to fit 10 times more fighters than should have been possible. When the bays opened, waves of fighters, bombers, and drones poured out like water from a broken dam. Laughter died in his throat. How, his tactical officer stammered. That's not possible, the power requirements alone. Signal all ships, screamed. Engage, engage now. The fleet opened fire. Beams of energy cut through space toward the approaching swarm. They hit some targets. Small explosions dotted the darkness. But there were so many human ships, moving so fast that most of the shots missed. Then the swarm reached the lines. The enslaver ships were built for intimidation. They were large and scary, designed to frighten merchants and passenger vessels into surrender. They had heavy weapons and thick armor, but they were slow. They turned like mountains. The human fighters danced around them like angry wasps. They did not attack blindly. They targeted engines first, leaving ships drifting but intact. They hit weapon systems, silencing guns but not destroying hulls. They moved in coordinated patterns, each flight supporting the others, striking weak points that they did not know they had. And strangest of all, they broadcast their communications openly. Every ship in the system could hear the human pilots talking. Eagle 7, target disabled, confirming crew evacuation status. Rescue 1, we have survivors in the debris field, moving to pick them up. All units command reminder, minimize casualties. Capture, don't kill. We want prisoners, not corpses. They could not understand what they were hearing. They had fought many battles. They knew what war looked like. Enemies tried to destroy you. They wanted you dead. They celebrated your deaths and danced on your wreckage. This was how things worked. But the humans were not trying to destroy them. They were trying to capture them. They were rescuing wounded from damaged ships. They were treating prisoners with medical care instead of spacing them. It made no sense. It violated every rule of combat that they understood. On one disabled cruiser, a captain watched human soldiers board his ship. He prepared to fight to the death, as honor demanded. Instead, the humans stunned him with non-lethal weapons, treated his injuries, and locked him in a holding cell with food and water. Why, he asked the human guard, why not kill me? The guard, a young woman with tired eyes, shrugged, because we're not like you. In 2 hours, 2/3 of the fleet was disabled or captured. The rest tried to flee, but human ships cut off their escape routes. One by one, they surrendered or were disabled. Warlord watched his empire crumble on the bridge sensors. His hands shook with rage and something else, something he had not felt in 100 years. Fear. Bring me the human passengers, he ordered his guards. If they want to fight, I'll give them bodies to fight over, execute them all. The guards ran toward the holding areas. They expected scared prisoners, crying and begging. Instead, they found the humans waiting for them. Had organized everyone. The former soldiers stood at the front. The engineers had disabled the electronic locks. The strongest adults formed a wall while children and elderly were moved to the back. The first guard through the door met a fire extinguisher swung by David the engineer. The metal cylinder hit the guard's head with a crack that echoed through the corridor. He dropped without a sound. The second guard raised his weapon. Lisa, the young mother, threw a meal tray at his face. While he flinched, a retired police officer named tackled him to the ground. More guards came, more humans fought. They had no real weapons. They had meal trays and fire extinguishers, broken furniture and bare hands. But they had numbers and they had fury and they had something they did not expect, complete unwillingness to give up. 72 years old with arthritis in both knees, broke a guard's arm with a move she had learned 50 years ago. Jenny used a piece of pipe to hold a corridor while children escaped behind her. A teenage boy named, who had never been in a fight in his life, threw himself at an armed guard to protect his younger sister. The guards were warriors. They had killed many people, But they had never faced people who fought like this, not to escape, but to hurt, to delay, to buy time for something they believed was coming. One guard screamed at the humans in frustration. "Why do you fight? You cannot win. You will all die." Bleeding from a cut on her forehead, smiled at him. "We're not trying to win," she said. "We're trying to hold." "Hold for what?" The ship shook. Alarms began to sound. Through the windows, the hostages could see human boarding ships attaching to the hull. Smile grew wider, for them. The human Marines breached the Celestial Dawn 17 minutes later. They moved through the ship in coordinated teams, securing sections, freeing hostages, and overwhelming resistance with precise, professional violence. When they reached the human section, they found the hostages had already won. 12 guards lay unconscious or restrained. The humans were injured, broken bones, cuts, burns from energy weapons, but they were alive. They were standing. A Marine sergeant looked at the scene with wide eyes. "What happened here?" Wiped blood from her face and straightened her spine. "We held the line, son. Now finish the job." The sergeant saluted. It was not proper protocol. She was a civilian, but it felt right. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We'll take it from here." On the bridge, Warlord found himself alone. His guards had fled or surrendered. His officers had abandoned their posts. His fleet was destroyed. Everything he had built was gone. When the human soldiers came for him, he did not fight. He stood in the center of his bridge and waited for death. But death did not come. Instead, a human officer put restraints on his wrists and read him something called rights. They took him to a medical bay and treated a wound on his arm that he had not noticed. They gave him water and food. He did not understand any of it. "Why?" he asked the officer. "Why don't you kill me?" The officer looked at him with cold eyes. "Because we're better than you, and because live prisoners send better messages than dead bodies." Did not understand the second part, not yet. But he would. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at the tactical display. Green lights covered the screen, captured ships, secured zones, rescued hostages. The battle was over. The fleet existed only as prisoners and wreckage. The Celestial Dawn was safe. But the real work was just beginning. "Open a channel to Warlord," ordered, "and make sure the Galactic Union can hear everything." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, sir, broadcasting on all frequencies." Straightened his uniform and faced the screen. When his face appeared, the Warlord looked smaller than before. His shell was cracked in places. His eyes had lost their cruel shine. He looked like what he was, a defeated tyrant waiting to learn his fate. Warlord said, "Your fleet is destroyed. Your soldiers are prisoners. Your hostages are free. I am giving you one chance only, to surrender yourself peacefully." His teeth clicked together, but there was no laughter in it now. "Surrender, so you can execute me in some public square, so you can make an example of me." "No," his voice was calm and steady, "so you can face trial, fair trial under laws that apply to everyone, with evidence presented and defense allowed and judgment made by neutral parties." The Warlord stared at him. "You're joking." "I'm not," stepped closer to the screen. "Listen carefully, because I will say this only once. Earth has a set of rules called the Geneva Conventions. They tell us how to treat prisoners of war. Your wounded are already receiving medical care from our doctors. Your crews are being given food and water and basic necessities. No one is being tortured. No one is being executed without trial." "Why?" His voice cracked. "This makes no sense. I took your people. I threatened to kill them. I am your enemy." "Yes, you are." Eyes were hard. "And we will make you pay for what you did. But we will do it through law, not through murder. We will do it in courts, not in dark rooms. Because that is what separates us from you." He paused, letting the words settle. "However," continued, "I need you to understand something else. If you had killed those hostages, if you had hurt them beyond what you already did, this conversation would be very different. How? We would have hunted you. His voice dropped to something cold and terrible. Not your fleet, not your government, you personally, every officer who gave orders, every soldier who pulled triggers. We would have tracked each of you across the galaxy for as long as it took, years, decades, however long was necessary. His mandibles twitched. No species has that kind of patience. We did not blink. On Earth, we spent 20 years hunting a terrorist leader across 3 continents. We followed one man through mountains and deserts and cities until we found him and ended him. Our people do not forget. We do not give up. We do not accept that some crimes are too hard to punish. He leaned forward. So here is your choice, warlord. You can surrender, face trial, and probably spend the rest of your life in prison. Or you can resist and spend the rest of your life running from people who will never, ever stop looking for you. Silence stretched across the void between ships. You're insane, finally said. All of you, this is not rational. Maybe not by your standards, smiled, but there was no warmth in it. But it works. On Earth, kidnapping certain nations' citizens became suicide because everyone knew the cost. Hijacking their aircraft became pointless because everyone knew what would happen. We taught our enemies that there were easier targets. And you will teach the galaxy the same lesson. That's the idea, glanced at a data pad. Your reinforcements are 28 hours away. They will arrive to find you in our custody and your fleet gone. They can fight us and lose, or they can go home and tell your government what happened here. I recommend the second option. In the Union Council chamber, dozens of species watched the broadcast in stunned silence. The ambassador's skin flickered with colors no one had names for. They were frantically calculating new risk assessments. They clicked to each other in rapid, worried patterns. They had expected human revenge. They had expected human cruelty. What they saw instead was something stranger and more disturbing: human discipline. The humans had won. They could do anything they wanted to their enemies. Instead, they were treating prisoners better than most species treated their own citizens. They were talking about trials and evidence and neutral judgment. Ambassador turned to Commander, who had been watching beside him. I do not understand, he admitted. You could destroy them completely. Why show mercy? Kept her eyes on the screen. Because destruction is not the goal. Deterrence is the goal. We want every species watching this to learn 2 things. What things? First, that taking human hostages gains you nothing. No ransom, no concessions, no profit, just defeat and imprisonment and shame. And second, that surrendering to humans is survivable. Finally looked at him. If we slaughtered every prisoner, future enemies would fight to the death. Why surrender if death is coming anyway? But if enemies know they will be treated fairly, if they know they will face justice instead of murder, they will surrender. They will give up instead of fighting. And that saves lives on both sides. His mind struggled with the concept. You show mercy, so future enemies will surrender more easily. Partly, but also because it's right. His voice softened slightly. We are angry, Ambassador. We are furious at what they did. Part of me wants to see suffer for every hour those hostages spent in fear. But acting on anger is easy. Acting on principle is hard. And principles are what separate civilization from barbarism. On the Celestial Dawn, the rescued hostages were being moved to human medical ships. The non-human passengers looked at their human fellow captives with new eyes. The woman who had questioned Jenny found her before they were separated. I was wrong, said. I said no one fights to rescue hostages. I said it was not how the galaxy works, but you did it. Your people came. Jenny smiled tiredly. She had a bandage on her head and bruises on her arms from the fighting. I told you they would. But why? The cost must be enormous. Ships, fuel, soldiers, time. Why spend so much on people who were already given up for lost? Jenny thought about the question. She remembered her grandmother telling stories about a place called Dunkirk, where boats crossed a dangerous sea to rescue trapped soldiers. She remembered her father talking about something called Operation, where planes flew thousands of miles to save hostages in a foreign land. "Because that's who we are," she finally said. "We don't leave our people behind, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when everyone says it can't be done," she shrugged. "Maybe it's not logical, maybe it's not efficient, but it's human, and I would rather be human than logical." Did not fully understand, but she remembered those words for the rest of her long life. Back on the Defiance, Admiral received confirmation that had surrendered. The warlord was taken into custody without further incident. His officers followed his example. The battle was officially over. Allowed himself a moment of relief. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to Earth," he said. "Tell them the hostages are safe, all of them, including the 743 humans." The officer hesitated. "Sir, there were 847 humans aboard." His face went still. "What?" "We lost 104, sir. 62 during the initial capture, 19 from medical conditions during captivity, 23 during the fighting in the ship." The officer's voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. "I'm sorry, sir." Closed his eyes. 104 names. 104 families who would receive terrible news. 104 people who would never see home again. This was the cost of the no concessions policy. These were the lives lost because Earth refused to pay ransom. Some of them might have been saved if the government had simply handed over money and mining rights. But knew the math that the public never saw. He knew the classified projections that showed what happened when you paid ransoms. He knew how many more lives would be lost in future kidnappings if they taught the galaxy that humans could be bought. The math was brutal, but it was clear. 104 dead today meant thousands saved over the next century. It did not make the grief easier. It did not make the letters to families less painful, but it made the decision right. "Record their names," said quietly. "Every single one. They will be remembered as heroes who showed the galaxy what humans are made of." "Yes, sir." Turned back to the viewport. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, other species were watching what had happened here. They were learning. They were recalculating. Good. Let them learn. Let them understand. Let every pirate and warlord and opportunistic government ask themselves, is it worth it? Is any ransom worth what the humans will do to us? And let them answer, no, no, it is not. The galaxy did not change overnight, but it changed. In the days after the battle, the Galactic Union held emergency sessions. Representatives argued about what had happened and what it meant. Some demanded that humans be punished for their reckless violence. Others wanted to expel them from the Union entirely. A few suggested that humanity was too dangerous to allow among civilized species. Commander stood before them all and listened patiently. When they finished, she spoke. "You have maintained peace for 3,000 years, she said. "This is impressive, but I ask you to look at that peace honestly. How many ransoms have been paid in those 3,000 years? How many hostages have been taken because the payments made it profitable? How many pirates and slavers have grown rich because the Union always chose to pay?" She pulled up statistics on the display. The numbers were not small. Thousands of kidnappings, billions in ransoms, entire criminal economies built on the certainty that the Union would always negotiate. "You call this peace," said, "but it is not peace. It is tribute. You pay the predators to leave you alone, and the predators grow stronger, and you pay more, and they grow stronger still. This is not peace. This is slow surrender." She turned to face the assembled representatives. "Humanity offers a different way. We do not claim it is painless. We lost 104 people because we refused to pay ransom. Their names will be remembered forever. Their families will mourn forever. The cost was real." "Then why," demanded the ambassador, Why pay such a cost? Because the alternative cost is higher. His voice was strong and clear. If we had paid, they would have learned that human lives are worth money. Next year, more ships would be taken, more ransoms demanded, more lives lost in an endless cycle of profitable kidnapping. She paused. We broke the cycle. We paid the cost once terribly, completely, and now it is over. She sat down. The Union continued to argue for many more days. In the end, they did not punish humanity. They could not agree on how, and secretly, many representatives were relieved. The humans had done something that no one else was brave enough to do. They had called the predators bluff and won. Word spread across the galaxy faster than light could travel. Every species talked about what the humans had done. News channels showed footage of the battle, of the hostage rescue, of Warlord being led away in chains. They showed humans treating prisoners with care. They showed admirals' cold promise to hunt down anyone who harmed human civilians. In bars and markets and government offices, people asked each other the same question. Would we do that? Could we do that? Most answered no. The cost was too high. The risk was too great. The principle was too cold. Humans were strange creatures who valued abstract ideas over immediate safety. But on 100 worlds, quiet changes began. The increased funding for their defense forces. They began calculating new models for deterrence instead of negotiation. Small species who had always paid tribute to larger neighbors started whispering about what might happen if they stopped. The Dominion felt the changes most of all. His trial was broadcast across the galaxy. Human prosecutors presented evidence of decades of crimes, slavery, murder, torture, kidnapping. Own records condemned him. Witnesses from a dozen species told their stories. The trial lasted 3 months. When it ended, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He would never see open sky again. He would spend his remaining centuries in a cell, alone with his memories of an empire that had crumbled in a single day. But the trial was only the beginning. The subject species of the Dominion had watched everything. They had seen a small fleet defeat a large one. They had seen captives rescued instead of abandoned. They had seen a tyrant face justice instead of walking free. And they began to ask, if the humans can do it, why can't we? 5 years after the Celestial Dawn incident, the first rebellion broke out in space. A species called the, who had been slaves for 800 years, rose against their masters. They used human tactics, coordinated strikes, psychological warfare, relentless pursuit of leaders. They refused to negotiate. They refused to accept half measures. They offered them concessions, they refused. They threatened mass executions, they kept fighting. Within a decade, they were free. Other rebellions followed. The Dominion, weakened by the loss of their fleet and damaged by the trial revelations, could not hold their empire together. Province after province broke away. Alliance after alliance shattered. 50 years after the Celestial Dawn, the Dominion ceased to exist. The species that had terrorized a quarter of the galaxy for 1,000 years was reduced to a few worlds, isolated and poor, surrounded by former slaves who remembered everything. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. Predators could be defeated. You just had to be willing to pay the price. In diplomatic academies across the stars, scholars studied what became known as the doctrine. The principle that refusing to negotiate with hostage-takers, while costly in the short term, created long-term security that no ransom could buy. Not every species adopted it. Some could not. Their cultures did not allow such calculated sacrifice. Some would not. The philosophy was too alien, too cold in its mathematics. But everyone understood it, and everyone calculated the risks differently when humans were involved. 80 years after the incident, an elderly, the grandmother who had fought with a fire extinguisher, gave her last interview. She was 152 years old, kept alive by human medicine that the galaxy still did not fully understand. Her white hair was thin, and her hands shook, but her eyes were as sharp as they had been in that holding cell. "People ask me if I was afraid," she said. "Of course I was afraid. I thought I would die. I thought we all would die. When those guards came for us, I was certain it was the end." "Then why did you fight?" Smiled, and for a moment she looked young again. "Because I knew they were coming. Our people, our fleet. I had served in the military. I knew what Earth was capable of. And I knew that if we could just hold on, if we could just survive a little longer, help would arrive." "How did you know?" "Because that's who we are." His voice was soft but certain. "Humans don't leave their people behind. We never have. We never will. It doesn't matter if you're on a distant star or a forgotten battlefield or a prison cell at the edge of known space. If you're one of us, we're coming for you." She passed away 2 weeks later. Her memorial service was attended by representatives of 30 species. Admiral, retired and gray but still straight-backed, gave the eulogy. The image of her shaking his hand on the celestial dawn was displayed behind him. 100 years after the incident, a young historian visited Earth to study humanity. She wanted to understand how such a young species had changed galactic politics so completely. She spent years in their archives, reading their histories, learning their stories. At the end of her research, she wrote a paper that was read across the Union. It concluded with a single paragraph. "Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the oldest or the most technologically advanced, but they possess something that most species lack: absolute commitment to their principles. When they say they will not negotiate, they will not negotiate. When they say they will hunt you down, they will hunt you down. When they say they are coming for their people, they will come, regardless of distance, regardless of cost, regardless of risk. This makes them unpredictable by galactic standards. It also makes them the safest species to be friends with and the most dangerous species to threaten. The galaxy is still learning this lesson. We would all do well to pay attention." And across the stars, human ships traveled freely. They carried merchants and diplomats, scientists and explorers, families seeking new homes and children dreaming of distant worlds. No one stopped them. No one threatened them. No one took their people and demanded ransom. Not because humans were the strongest. Not because they had the biggest fleets. But because everyone in the galaxy knew, that humans did not bargain with killers. And they never would. The stars had learned a new truth. There were some species you did not threaten, some ships you did not stop, some people you did not take. Because the humans would come for them. And they would never, ever stop.